Live from the Rocky Mountains. Yeah, it is a cold one today. Welcome into Redacted. And we are facing an energy crisis, a food crisis, the likes of which we haven't seen in perhaps decades. And of course, those who are marginalized, those who are on the fringes, those whose countries do not have the infrastructure and supplies will be hardest hit. We're already seeing the devastating effects of what this is lining up to be in the Sudan and other parts of Africa, of course. Europe is getting desperate. You heard from Friedrich Merz today from Germany saying we will basically go in there and open up the strait ourselves as they've been militarizing. So we're going to look at food and energy shortages that no one really wants to confront as all of this fertilizer shocks are now starting to hit.
We're also going to talk about how Congress is expanding FISA, meaning they will continue to spy on us, as we were warned by Edward Snowden. If you were under the misapprehension that Republicans stood for freedom, you are wrong. They both, it's a uniparty. They all want to expand government powers at the expense of your freedoms, and we're going to talk about that. Also, a new report out shows that the massive amount of lithium that's under the Carolinas. Who didn't see this coming? Or, I mean, are you kidding me? Where after Hurricane Helene hit and everyone was saying, look, this is a land grab. This was a specific diversion of a hurricane using the NEXRAD radar system or HARP arrays, pushing this storm right over the Carolinas. And now we get this massive report about basically billions upon billions of dollars of lithium that's available there that could power everything that we need. So we don't have to rely on China. We don't have to rely on any of these other countries to bring in this lithium. It's all right there in the Carolinas. How convenient. Ann Vandersteel is going to be joining us a little bit later to talk about that. Also, these U.S. military bases that are being targeted, why are they experiencing blackouts and water being shut off at multiple locations across the United States? We just heard that from a U.S. admiral. We're going to talk about all of that and more on the show today. So let's get into it, and let's start right now with this is exactly what we've been warning about. For weeks, we've talked about the food side of the Strait of Hormuz story, not just the oil, not just the gas prices, but the fertilizer, the shipping routes, the diesel, the natural gas, the basic inputs that, of course, keep the global food system moving. And now it's here. And the war with Iran has essentially pushed this crisis from a theory now into reality. The entire global economy starts seizing up, oil skyrocketing again. Here is, look at this, the price of Brent crude jumped to $126 a barrel earlier today and then fell back down to about $113, but hitting a high that we haven't seen for years. Today, shipping insurance, of course, exploded and also being canceled, as we've highlighted here, the Lloyd's of London canceling many of their insurance contracts through the Strait of Hormuz. Fertilizer prices surging, farmers getting squeezed, and food prices moving much, much higher now. And most of the infuriating part of all of this, of course, is none of this is a surprise. The people in power were warned about this. We warned about it here. Our next guest has been warning about it for years, even far longer than we have, by a landslide. Mike Adams is the founder of the Brighteon platforms, naturalnews.com. You might follow him on X under the Health Ranger. He has been out on this for years. Mike, great to have you back on the show.
It's great to join you again. Thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure. You know, the FT, the Financial Times, had a pretty ominous story about a week ago. I just want to put up the headline here, The Coming Global Food Crisis. It's a really interesting read, but I think one of the most interesting parts of this article stood out to me. The disruption is especially dangerous because it hits before the harvests that are coming in the fall. Higher fertilizer prices now and the lockdown now means that farmers use less fertilizer, don't have access to it, which means they plant less, which means they produce much less food. And then, so we might not see it on our store shelves at the moment, but this is the cascading effect. What do you think about that?
Well, we will be impacted in Western countries, even in the United States. Although we won't face mass starvation in America, we will face much higher food prices. But there will be mass starvation in other countries around the world. And research leads to being able to identify exactly which countries those are. That includes the Sudan, it includes Yemen, it includes Bangladesh. There are risks in India, risks even in Egypt, and many other countries that are on, they have tens of millions of people that are just marginally getting by every single year. Many of those people are in states of famine every year, and they would die if not for food aid. But that food aid will not be nearly as available or affordable. So the food aid organizations around the world are going to be wrecked. Now, there's actually a double threat here that your audience needs to keep in mind. Number one is, of course, fertilizer exports from countries like China and Russia have been halted. So when India went to China and said, hey, we need some fertilizer in order to feed our people, China said, sorry, we have to keep it for ourselves domestically. But then there are countries like Bangladesh that have their own fertilizer production plants using the Haber-Bosch process that converts natural gas into ammonia and urea. But you need natural gas as the feedstock. And of course, natural gas is not shipping. Qatar Energy has declared force majeure on their commitments. So even if you have a fertilizer plant in your country, you don't get fertilizer right now. So it's a double hit on these countries. And the bottom line is that literally hundreds of millions of people are about to be thrust into extreme famine and real starvation deaths later this year and well into 2027.
The cruelty of imposing this on countries that are allies, countries that have nothing to do with this, and they can't do anything about it except maybe cry and beg, but the globalists will do nothing about it. And so, this will create warlike conditions. This is going to create instability. So can we talk about that as well?
Well, as they say, 9 meals away from anarchy, right? So when your populations can't feed themselves, then they begin to revolt. So we will see social upheaval in many countries, but not in Russia. They can feed themselves. Not in China because they have resources and multiple trading partners with lots of food redundancy. And not in America or Canada or the UK, but again, these vulnerable countries, many of them in Africa, some in the Middle East, and some in Southeast Asia. It's going to be brutal, even for Thailand. I didn't even mention Thailand. They're going to face a lot of political instability because of this. But the bottom line is that will lead to global instability in supply chains because many of these countries are involved in things that affect us. For example, Egypt runs the Suez Canal, right? And if we can't use the Suez Canal for some reason because Egypt is demanding food aid and they're not getting it, they could shut down the canal. And it's like, your guest and my friend Michael Yan has warned for years about routes and resources. What we're actually witnessing right now on a global scale is the shutting down of those routes and resources that have created food abundance and material abundance for the human species for decades. And that is now ending. That is ending, at least until there's some resolution of this war of choice that Trump has thrust us all into, even though he didn't have to. That's where we are.
I heard a member of Congress saying just the other day, it's costing about $1 billion a day now just for the Strait of Hormuz to be for us to be dealing with the Strait of Hormuz being close. So wait a second, we're spending that now that it's closed, but when it was open, we weren't spending that. It absolutely makes it's maddening. It makes no sense at all. Michael Yan, as you pointed out, he was talking about, of course, about the Strait of Malacca specifically coming next, and of course, what's happening in the Baltics, what's about to happen in the Arctic Circle as well. And, his whole point has been that this is really a globalist push for depopulation agenda, that this is all part of the plan. And so we need to go look a layer deeper here than what the Washington newspapers are telling us, right?
Well, absolutely. And it's hilarious to me that every AI model today and every search engine will still tell you that depopulation is a conspiracy theory. But if you go back to 1969, the New York Times covered a meeting of over 200 organizations that also included President Richard Nixon's science advisor, who said that controlling population needs to be the #1 priority of every nation on Earth. And that meeting was also, they headlined Dr. Paul Ehrlich, the author of, I believe, The Population Bomb. And he specifically proposed, and it was widely supported, that we should put infertility chemicals into the water supply and also into food exports that would affect countries like Africa. And then, of course, years later, we know that, for example, the Kenyan Catholic Bishops Association started testing the vaccines that were being given to the young women of childbearing age in Kenya and found that they were laced with infertility chemicals. So there has been a decades-long effort to achieve depopulation, And I believe that the COVID years were also one test case, kind of a pilot program to see how much they could get away with. And they got away with a lot. And now we're facing the full rollout. And it is deliberate, and it is going to be devastating to those who are not prepared.
Yeah. Just look at the United Nations. You put this up on the screen. You mentioned Sudan earlier. We'll just put this up on the screen here. Over half of South Sudan's population faces acute hunger as we speak right now.
And then for Americans, there will be supplies. We won't have the same abundance, and it will be incrementally higher. We saw this happen right away when the war in Ukraine broke out. Prices went crazy. It's hard to imagine it getting worse, but it will, right? Can we talk about that?
Given that so many Americans are one paycheck away from being kicked out of their apartment or their home, given that Americans are paying the highest prices ever for health insurance, car insurance, home insurance, many Americans are on the verge of bankruptcy right now, of being homeless. And I've painted a picture where if you fast forward to mid-2027, you're going to see millions of Americans, millions more, living out of their vehicles, even with their families, with children in a van, trying to raise a family in a van, because food is so expensive that it displaces the income they would otherwise spend on rent or a home or other things. Many Americans are going to have to start letting go of key expenditures in order to not starve. I do believe the food will still be available in North America. You're not going to see shelves completely wiped out, but prices are going to be so high that those who don't have over $100,000 a year in income are going to find it very difficult to feed themselves.
It's just absolutely devastating. Let's talk about Europe a little bit. Friedrich Merz today was playing dress up, wearing a military garb, like he's about to be attacked, standing there in front of armored vehicles, talking about Europe and how basically Germany now, because it's become massively militarized and spending billions now to militarize Germany, I guess, to fight Russia. But we will open the Strait of Hormuz, essentially. Like, we've got to stop this. Germany's going to step in now. We are being devastated. But Europe is getting desperate. Just watch Friedrich Merz here playing dress up.
Sicherheit. Und genauso, es ist ein Beitrag zu einer erneuerten transatlantischen Partnerschaft. Ich habe das ja mehrfach betont. Wir setzen uns in diesem Geist auch dafür ein, jetzt schnell die iranische Blockade der Straße von Hormuz zu beenden. Wenn die entsprechenden Voraussetzungen gegeben sind, dann steht Deutschland bereit, sich auch militärisch zu engagieren, um die Freiheit der Seewege zu gewährleisten vor dem europäischen.
So Germany is now going to step in to secure the sea lanes in the Strait of Hormuz. So Europe is getting desperate, and of course the joke in Europe, where we lived for a number of years, was, what is it, if Germany
sneezes, the rest of Europe gets a cold.
Yeah. So obviously, so goes Germany, so goes Europe. So they're getting desperate in Europe. This is hitting them particularly hard.
Well, that saying that you just mentioned actually comes out of an era when Germany was fueled by cheap Russian gas. Right. And that era is long gone, right? So Germany is not the industrial center of Western Europe. And by the way, you saw Merz there, dressing up as a clown. I think his collar is too small. He needs more cowbell for that one right there. It's a clown show every single day, what they're doing. But Germany's leaders, and by the way, I'm not directing my comments towards the German people or the British people or the French people, because there are good people everywhere, and everybody wants to survive and thrive and raise families and be able to keep what they earn. But their leaders are running a suicide cult. That there's no question about that. It's cultural suicide, it's economic suicide, it's energy suicide. They can dress up all they want. It doesn't change anything. The leaders of Germany are anti-German. The leaders of France are anti-French. It's so bad that Western Europe will be lucky to survive this era of horribly treasonous leadership. And I feel very sad for the people of Western Europe and what they're having to endure.
Right. Hopefully you're seeing some signs of life, though, at least from the opposition inside of Germany standing up to this tyranny. So hopefully we'll see a shift there. But again, maybe you can just paint a picture for us, Mike, as we wrap up this segment on on the energy issue and the food issue right now. I know you've done some really nice infographics. People can follow you on X on that to show how this is all layered out. But maybe you could really paint a picture for our audience, like when these different markers start to hit and how it's going to start to affect us.
Well, the key thing to understand is that our modern food supply is simply energy repackaged through photosynthesis to create calories. That's the way the agricultural industrial complex currently operates. And without nitrogenous fertilizers that are produced as a result of natural gas, we would not be able to feed more than about 4 billion people, or about half the current population of the world. And that's a very optimistic estimate. So there's a delay, though, as you mentioned the timeline there. There's a delay. So we're still eating last year's food right now for the most part. As current crops begin to fail, and we don't have a total failure in North America. Some farmers bought fertilizer. Some paid a lot higher of a price. Some applied less fertilizer, so they'll have lower crop yields. But it's not Mad Max yet. However, when you get into the fall planting season in America and in places like Canada, that's when you're really going to feel the shortage, and that impacts then the food that people eat next year. So 2027 will be far worse than 2026 for North America, for the Middle East, for Africa, for Southeast Asia, India, even Turkey, you name it. So the real hard part of this happens in 2027, and almost nobody is really aware of that yet. I mean, your viewers are, so thank you for covering this issue.
Well, and I just want to put this up on the screen. You posted this at naturalnews.com about the engineered collapse here and the collapse by, and I love how you started off, the collapse by design, because that's exactly what this is.
Yeah, absolutely. This is clearly engineered. And it's like I said, see, I think the COVID years were kind of a pilot program to see what they could get away with, what level of obedience could they achieve, what level of shutdowns could they get people to go along with. And it turns out that most of the world was very obedient to these insane demands, like you have to wear this mask that doesn't work, and you have to stand 5 feet away because a virus can't fly 6 feet. You know, things like that. It was all nonsensical. It was almost like a Simon Says game on a global scale for low IQ obedient cultists. And as a result, then they realized they can tell people almost anything. They can tell people, oh, you're going to have to pay higher gas prices so that we can win, and that when you're starving, it's a new golden age, things like that. And a lot of people will go along with that, but not the ones that want to live. So for your audience that want to survive and thrive, it's actually very doable. I'm not actually a doomer. If you're well-informed and prepared, you can learn to grow food, you can stockpile food, you can get your money into a system that preserves wealth, like actual gold and silver, things like that. There are things you can do. It's not the end of the world if you're informed.
Right. That's what we try to hit on people here. Like if you've been watching our show, you watch what Mike does, you read what Mike writes. Like just take care of your family. Like there are certain steps you can put in place to start really, like we have in our garage, we have, and our food stores, like making sure that we have extra food and extra food supplies that can last years, preparing for that, and having gold and silver when this monetary system collapses, which is coming. Right. Mike, stick around. We want to talk about FISA with you if we can after a short break here, because Congress just extended really one of the worst pieces of legislation, nefarious pieces of legislation in American history that captures Americans in a dragnet of surveillance, and then of course moves towards prosecution of those individuals, American citizens, and then sharing that same information with Israel. That's all part of this plan. That's all part of this new extension of FISA. So we'll do that in a moment. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends at Shopify, because if you have an idea and you'd like to launch an e-commerce store to the world, Shopify is where you should go first. And in fact, we lead by example. What you're looking at there is the Redacted store. We absolutely do use Shopify, and you can tell because of that little purple Shop Pay button. Anytime you see that on the web, you are shopping on a Shopify store. It's easy. You might wonder, oh, I want to buy this thing. How do they already have my information? Because you are in Shopify's platform. Shopify handles all shipping, all fulfillment, all payment accepting, help with customer support. Really, from soup to nuts is where you need to go. So go to shopify.com/redacted and sign up for a 1-month trial period today. Don't wait. Launch yourself into the world and your idea, whatever it is you have, and we want to support you. So shopify.com is where you go to get started. And again, they have around-the-clock customer support. They have beautiful web design. You don't need to know all of that. You don't need to code your own website, figure out e-commerce. No, they do it for you. Shopify.com/redacted.
Got a couple of super chats here. Let's see. Yeah, Chili Prepper says, I thought EU was remilitarizing to attack Russia. They absolutely are. That's exactly what Europe is trying to do right now. And by the way, most of the attacks that you're seeing on Russian infrastructure, oil infrastructure over the past few weeks has come at the behest of the British targeting specifically, according to our sources. And the UK is specifically responsible for hitting that massive oil infrastructure over the past few hours as well. Ukraine is largely defeated, so all of that is coming from the UK. Yeah, and a few other comments here, but we're back here now.
All right. Well, the House passed a 3-year extension of FISA, Section 702, one of the worst violations of American civil liberties in history. It allows Americans to be surveyed under a mass dragnet aimed, of course, at foreign terrorism. They need to do this to stop the terrorists. It's really the terrorists that are doing it. Little did people know that back during the Obama administration, they entered into an agreement with Israel around FISA to actually share that surveillance about Americans with a foreign nation. And before you ask, yes, that data includes spying materials used on American citizens. We've talked to you about how AI systems being built now would compile your social media in addition to whatever else has been collected on you to decide on the spot whether or not you need to be killed. If you think that's only for people in Gaza, wake up. So in other words, the Israeli government can effectively access data on American citizens with little to no oversight. Mike Adams is the founder of Brighteon Platforms and naturalnews.com. He's been warning about this. What do we make of this? Did I get anything wrong there? Is it in fact as dystopic as I just described?
Well, it is. It's essentially unlimited illegal spying on American citizens because it's very easy under FISA to create a justification to spy on anyone they want. For example, they could have a CIA office overseas email you from a, quote, terror group. And then they can use FISA rules, which require no warrant and no real due process, to then hoover up all of your email claiming that you are now adjacent to that terror group that's actually run by the CIA or Mossad or whoever. So this is again, it's a total violation of the Fourth Amendment. It's unlimited illegal spying on all Americans for any reason whatsoever. Now, the important thing, though, as I'm sure your audience knows quite well, is that this is actually used to hoover up blackmail material on important people, whether they be Supreme Court justices or governors, members of Congress. They spy on you. They find something that you might be embarrassed if it went public. It doesn't even have to be anything too crazy. You know, you took money from the wrong donor or whatever, or they spy on your family members, and then they can threaten to expose a family member or even a niece or a nephew or whoever. And then that's used as blackmail material to keep you in line. So it's not just that Jeffrey Epstein has blackmail material, you know, so does the deep state of the United States government. And above all, it's absolutely shameful, in my opinion, that Donald Trump, who himself was a victim of FISA spying, is supporting it now and throwing the American people under the bus in the process.
You bring up such a great point. Friend of the show, FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin, one of his, like, I hate to say cause de celeb because it sounds like he's doing it for I don't know, points, but he really has like tied, you know, he's been so passionate about fighting this and educating Americans about all of this and how this is used as this massive dragnet. And then you have like members of an administration, members of Congress who get caught up in this FISA, and it's all intentional. So that you have almost like a J. Edgar Hoover style blackmail operation against powerful people in the United States and people in our own government, who are, you know, this material, however it's being used up, hoovered up, as you say, is totally unrelated to the target. It's like ancillary material that's being sucked up and used. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely correct. And remember that this also allows backdoor access into all of the corporate-run services and devices that are in your home that are listening to you. So, you know, your Alexa device. Remember, one of Amazon's largest customers is the CIA. And everything that you say in your home around a device like that, and there are other companies with other devices and the doorbell, video cameras, and so on, that are constantly watching and listening and uploading this information to platforms that can be instantly and illegally accessed by the NSA or even in some cases the CIA. Now, this is only going to get worse with robots. So once people start inviting humanoid robots into their homes, and they'll be offered on a lease basis. You know, you pay a monthly fee. This is still a couple years away, by the way, but it's coming. Those robots are going to walk around your house, and they're going to video everything. And if they see something that they want to report, oh, I saw an AR-15 leaning up against the wall. Yeah, it's Texas. We have 50 of them, by the way. You know, it's not crazy. Right. That's going to get reported, and then, oh, ATF's going to knock on your door. Why do you have so many guns? Because it's Texas, again. But anyway, that's just an example. Or they see gold bars, or where did you get the gold? You know, that's what's going to happen. If you invite robots into your home, they're going to be spy machines, unless they're, you know, disconnected from the cloud, which is not the way they will be sold.
Right. I mean, Alexa devices, right? I mean, literally is like the ultimate, you know, backdoor CIA tool that's been just millions of Americans just like allowed it to flow right into their houses. And then, of course, I think, you know, the Ring doorbell, right, was then purchased by Amazon as well. So that's now part of the Amazon network.
Yeah, and on top of that, you know, Windows, in my view, based on my research, and I have a technical background, I'm a developer, Windows appears to be increasingly just spyware, where it seems to be key logging. They have a feature that they announced that would be rolled out where it takes a screenshot of your screen every few seconds so that you can have AI go back and undo things or remember what you were doing or organize your projects. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't want Microsoft Corporation watching my screens all the time. You know, I don't want them listening to, monitoring my keystrokes if I'm typing in a password to a banking website or something like that. But that's what's increasingly happening, and all of that has backdoors to the NSA. So if your audience wants to maintain their privacy, you have to go to more and more well-informed measures like using de-Googled phones or using Linux operating systems and things like that.
It becomes increasingly arduous to do. And I just feel really sad that Edward Snowden, you know, created this wave of allowing us to know what the government was doing. We had this sort of cursory response from the Obama administration where they introduced the Freedom Act and ended bulk collection. But it's just a retread. They're doing it a different way. So it's still happening, and if not worse. So what was it all for?
Well, concentration of power in the hands of the regime, whatever regime it happens to be in power. As you know, it's all the same uniparty, and they are just highly focused on maintaining their power. That's also why, and I understand this may be controversial, but I've seen documents from the Treasury that talk about how reducing the lifespan of Americans will save the Treasury over $11 trillion over the coming years. Because of not having to pay out Social Security and other benefits. So we actually, the more people that get on government benefits, whether it's disability or pensions or Medicare, they become an accounting liability to the system that then sees, well, how do we reduce our liabilities so that we can print more money for war and still maintain the currency? And their answer eventually is get people to die off. Well, how do we do that? Hey, start a war, starve everybody, make food expensive. I mean, it's not a conspiracy. It's accounting. It's accounting at this point. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about that Israeli piece of this. Again, as you mentioned Obama, you mentioned Obama, and this was made during the Obama administration. This deal was made during the Obama administration under FISA to hand over surveillance data of Americans to the Israelis. Like, what?
Yeah, well, we know who runs the current administration, and it's not the American people. We know that they answer to seemingly Netanyahu, or maybe there are a lot of blackmail elements from the Epstein years that are still in circulation. That's the currency of the system, is blackmail. So what we're looking at here is the complete abandonment of the representational constitutional republic that we were promised and that we are repeatedly promised in every election cycle. Vote for me, I'll represent you. Vote for me, I'll put America first. That's not happening, and it never will happen until there's some kind of real fundamental reform of how the money flows through our political system. And that's why I'm a fan of Colonel Douglas MacGregor. I know you are too. And I think his thinking along these lines is very important, and he's got some good ideas about reform. And I think you're going to have some interesting and maybe positive things happening ahead, after this current collapse.
Yeah, I think, inevitably something has to give here, because we are in an empire that is collapsing in real time. $39 trillion in debt. It's unsustainable. And of course, you saw the new GDP numbers that came out, and you see what's happening right now. The markets are kind of excited about a lot of different things, but underlying massive fault cracks right now seems similar to right before the Roman Empire collapsed. It's hard to disagree with that.
Decentralizing from the control grid is the number one survival method right now. So decentralize out of the banking system if you can, decentralize away from the medical system to the extent you can, decentralize from public education if you can homeschool, and also decentralize from the energy grid as much as you can. So, home power, actually solar is making a comeback. If you have solar power and a battery system and an EV, then you don't need petroleum to have transportation. Trump has become the greatest EV salesperson in history, actually, because
who would have thought that? Everyone would say, we're going to go back to gas guzzling cars. We're going to, get 6 miles to the gallon. And then suddenly now, as this oil shock hits and people are really paying attention to how they can protect their families, and you have all these homesteaders. I just go out. I don't leave the house very much, but when I do, and I occasionally see some redacted viewers, a gentleman came up to me just recently, and he's a homesteader, and he said, "Yeah, I've got solar panels set up. I've got chickens set up. All of it for my house." And he's like, I know they love to vilify solar. He's like, "No, my homestead runs on solar." Look at Congressman Massey. It's like being able to protect yourself right now against these people, these globalists.
Yeah, we really have to learn to be more self-reliant and build local communities. Strong local decentralized communities is where all the action is at, especially when it comes to food resilience. So it's not just grow your own food, but also meet your local farmers and visit the farmer co-ops and the CSAs, the community supported agriculture, and support them financially by purchasing from them. So, look, humanity will make it through this, but not all current humans will survive it. I think that's an honest assessment of where we are.
Yeah, I think you're right. Mike Adams, great to see you as always. Where can people find out more of your great work? Because we follow you on X, but there's you've got your hands in a lot of different baskets.
Well, thank you. My articles and infographics are at naturalnews.com. My videos each day are at brightvideos.com. And I have free tools for people. Brightlearn.ai is a free site, 53,000 books available to download free, hundreds of audiobooks full length, and now we've just launched books in Espanol. So we have hundreds of them translated into Spanish, available completely free.
Wow. Yeah, I love what you're doing there. I really do. Mike, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us as always.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Really appreciate it. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about Hurricane Helene. Do you remember that? And do you remember what happened afterwards when we saw many of us, of course, were predicting the land grab that was about to unfold because of the massive amounts of lithium that were found under the Carolinas. Well, now we just got a new report out confirming, of course, that yes, there is billions upon billions of dollars of lithium, perfect for land grab, perfect for having a massive hurricane destroy that area. And Ann Vandersteel, perhaps no one else has done the level of journalism on this story that Ann has done. And of course, the work that she's done with her documentary about Hurricane Helene and the massive land grab there. We're going to speak with Ann about all of that when we come back. How are we looking in the chat room today? Good?
Mm-hmm. I think so, yeah.
Everyone doing well today?
Yeah. I think so. You want to put this comment up from Rodrimex.
Where?
The top one. Markets are fake and dilute the dollar. Yes, that feels true.
They do. When you certainly see all of these people piling in from the Trump administration, piling in and making all of these bond bets right before the oil markets are moving and shaking, or, on the poly market side of things. And then President Trump just comes out and says, it's, how did he describe it? He described it not as a circus. What was the word he used? I forget the word he used. So he just was basically acknowledging, this is happening. I forget the word. Somebody in the chat room let me know. It's Thursday. My brain is fried. But first, I want to tell you about this. Ladies and gentlemen, our world is being poisoned. Every day we're exposed to more chemicals sprayed into our skies, leaching into our food, polluting our air and water, from pesticides, heavy metals, to hormone disruptors, synthetic additives. These toxins are bombarding our bodies, silently destroying our health. But there is something you can do to fight back, and it starts in your gut. Kimchi One from Bright Core Nutrition contains over 900 strains of beneficial probiotics. I take it every day. I take 2 capsules every day with my supplements. It helps flushes out toxins, restores gut balance, and support your immune system. My mother-in-law takes it. My mom takes it. My wife takes it. We all take it. When your gut is strong, your body can resist. You'll feel the difference. Better digestion, more energy, clearer thinking. A lot of Americans don't like the taste of actual kimchi, but that's why they developed Kimchi One, because it has no taste. It's cold pressed, so you don't have to taste it at all. You don't have to worry about the fermented foods. South Koreans love it, but Americans maybe don't have the taste for fermented foods like they do. Kimchi One is all natural, non-GMO, dairy-free, gluten-free, 100% made in the USA by a company that actually cares about your health. So check them out. Go to mybrightcore.com/redacted and you'll get 25% off your order, or call them. And here's the best deal. If you call them, you'll get 50% off and free shipping. They're an American company, so they want to actually develop an American friendship and relationship with their customers. Imagine that. 888-404-6312. Get up to 50% off and free shipping. 888-404-6312 to get 50% off and free shipping. Our thanks to Bright Core for supporting our show. All right. Yeah, today I had with my lunch, I actually had some
kimchi,
actual spicy kimchi. And I was thinking of Philip, our producer, who eats it like 5 times a day. And I had it with my little meal that
I say that I have my bottle of the Kimchi One, and like the days I don't eat kimchi, I grab one of those. So I get at least some every day. And I think I'm up to 12 pills I've had in the past 3 months. Those 12 days I haven't eaten kimchi.
Because you eat the real thing.
He just has it. He has it like intravenously going into his body.
Yeah.
Obsessed with it. All right.
I'm in a weird mood today where I'm only eating snack food. No meals.
I was hearing like weird things coming from the kitchen. I was like, what are you doing over there?
I don't know.
Eat a meal.
I know. And then you feel more hungry. It's not a good thing. So
today is like a really weird day. I'm just going to say today just feels weird. Isn't there like a weird energy about the day?
A little bit. Can you just skip it?
I don't know. No, like it's just, there's so many weird things happening. It seems to me like a calm before the storm. That's how I'm describing it. I don't know. Can you feel it, guys? Like, I don't know. I have this weird kind of feeling about it. But there is good news. I lost 11 pounds today. So not today, but cumulatively up to. So now I've hit so that's one good thing, but everything else has just been kind of weird today. Speaking of weird, it's not our next guest. Our next guest is not weird at all, but this story is incredibly weird. What if the biggest story from Hurricane Helene wasn't just the flooding and destruction, but was sitting underneath the ground waiting to be gobbled up in a massive land grab? Well, here we go. A new geological survey report just out shows that the Appalachian Mountains may contain a massive lithium deposit, including areas in the Carolinas, of course. And we were reporting this back when, and it was all, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Okay. Of course, lithium powers the batteries in our phones, laptops, electric vehicles, and, so-called green economy. Everything is run on lithium. Billions of dollars now in critical minerals are buried under that land. So when Hurricane Helene devastated those mountain communities, was it done on purpose? What was the NextRad radar array using to push these storms into place? Friend of the show, Dane Wigington, explained how the NextRad was used right over the Carolinas. Watch this little clip.
Was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just the result of natural processes and climate patterns, or was it manipulated? The circular blue flashes seen in this video are frequency transmissions from the NextRad network of transmitter installations. All available science evidence makes clear that atmospheric frequency transmissions can and do have a repelling effect on air masses, especially if and when the air masses have been seeded with electrically conductive nanoparticles. The brighter the blue flash from a frequency transmission installation, the more pronounced and powerful the repelling effect on any air mass or storm in the vicinity will be. Where there are no blue flashes, there is no transmission, thus no repelling effect, thus no resistance for a migrating storm. Translation: a migrating storm will be hindered from moving toward frequency transmissions and will easily migrate in a direction with no transmissions. So again, I ask, was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just an act of nature, or was it engineered? You decide.
Well, I think we've all decided that. This was no longer just a disaster recovery story. It becomes a story about land, control, resources, and who gets to decide the future of this area, the future of Appalachia. Our next guest has been digging into that exact question. Ann Vandersteel created a documentary about Hurricane Helene, what it did to the Carolinas. She's been on the ground there like no other journalist, covering this deeply, and what she says became a massive land grab in the aftermath. Watch a piece of her documentary.
We will look into getting clarity on the number of people who perished due to this catastrophic storm and the fallout from the government response. The death toll reportedly seems remarkably low considering the amount of body bags ordered, the field reports of bodies in refrigerator trucks, Chinook helicopters with hundreds of bodies loaded by search and rescue teams, and law enforcement efforts who are pulling bodies out from across the region. Hurricane Helene's assault on western North Carolina was nothing short of catastrophic. Torrential rains, exacerbated by the mountainous topography, brought torrents of water cascading through valleys, engulfing towns, uprooting businesses, and transforming bustling communities into disaster zones.
Ann Vandersteel is the creator of Ground Zero North Carolina documentary, and she joins us now about these latest revelations. Ann, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to see you both, Clayton and Natalie. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Great to have you back here on the show. So this new report, I think certainly didn't stun me. I'm sure it didn't stun you, but just your response about this new U.S. Geological Survey report showing just the billions that could power our country through this green economy happens to be right in this zone. What do you make of that?
What are the odds of that, Clayton, that the United States just discovered a 328-year lithium supply right as we're entering an AI war with China?
Right.
But the government has already been funding that land that it sits under. And at the same time, with this full-scale war with China, this isn't just really a resource story, frankly. This is about who controls the future economy. We're talking about roughly 2.3 million metric tons of lithium, which is enough to replace centuries of imports at today's levels. And also important is that it doesn't mean all of it is immediately recoverable, but it is strategically significant. So it is a monster story, and we've known about this depository for a long time because we've been putting money into it since, well, we can track it back to 2017 with some of the documents coming out of the government.
So you've spent so much time there covering this story, talking with the homeowners who've lost everything, the victims, the family members who've lost not only their homes, but their loved ones, entire infrastructure wiped away. I guess first on this lithium piece, how many homeowners did you talk to that were kind of fully aware that this seems like a land grab?
Every single one of them. There wasn't one homeowner that I spoke with that wasn't aware of what was in them thar hills, as they say. Between the finest quartz silica there in spruce pine and the lithium in the hills, everybody's aware of it. North Carolina was a major lithium producer decades ago. King Mountain was already operating. So the geology isn't new, but the urgency is what is new. And the public is hearing about this now, but the government has known about this for years through their mapping and prior mining. And, with the AI race with China, this isn't about software. I heard your previous guest, my good friend, Mike Adams, talking about spying. This is more about the supply chains. China today possesses about 60 to 70% of the world's lithium and up to 90% of the rare earths. So even when lithium is mined somewhere else, it still often goes to China to be refined. So they didn't just build technology over there, they built the control of the metals. And don't think for one second that the people sitting in the hills of North Carolina aren't fully aware of just how resource rich they are. In fact, if you go back in time, the original gold rush was actually out of North Carolina. So all of these sit in veins that are on top of each other, and this is nothing new to those good folks there. And that's why families generationally live in those hills. You know, they know what they've got, and they're there to protect it. And the families there still know that the government is probably not going to do what they should, unlike what they do with Alaska, where the folks get a check for $1,800 every year, and it goes up in time. I don't see any compensation coming to the people of North Carolina, not at all compared to what they should be compensated for the loss that they've sustained.
When you've talked not only about, of course, the land grab, the lithium piece of this, but the cloud seeding, the nanoparticles, and the weather manipulation over this area, I mean, to anybody paying attention to these next-rad radar arrays and the nanoparticles being sprayed through chemtrails, what do the people there say about that? Do they call it a conspiracy theory, or they fully understand what was dumped on them?
Is anybody calling it a conspiracy theory anymore, Clayton? I mean, you've got states that are banning, geoengineering, although they're not successfully doing it because of Title 50, has found loopholes around it. It's ridiculous. In fact, no, people aren't calling it a conspiracy theory anymore. Only the people in government are, because they don't want to deal with it because there's so much money involved. I talked about in the movie Ground Zero in North Carolina, polysodium acrylate, which is a cloud seeding material. But oddly enough, it's also used in tandem in separating mine tailings from the actual ore. So isn't it just convenient that you would have a massive amount of rain dumped in the exact same area where mining is ongoing and could potentially be developed? And again, polysodium acrylate, you can look this up, fact check me all you want. I did the research on this because, it is just such a odd coinkydink, as they say. And here in Florida, we are under severe drought. And as you see systems trying to get here, all of a sudden, there it is. Next rad radar pops up, fires up, and the system just dies. We have what I call damp rid clouds, where if you live in Florida, damp rid is something you put in your closet to keep the moisture out of the air. These clouds are sucking the moisture out, but they're not releasing anything. And then they just dissipate. And every night you go to bed, there's no stars, which means there's still stuff up there blocking the sun. And it's just a continuation. And we have a big AI threat down here in Florida with 5 AI data centers that they're trying to build and are in various phases of development. And wouldn't you know, it's all in the places that we're having massive fires. What are the odds?
Yeah, what are the odds? When you look at the land grab piece of this question, like what we saw after Hurricane Katrina, of course, a lot of the waterfront areas where you had all these sort of impoverished homes, those people were completely relocated and moved out. That whole land area was completely revitalized. There's no homeowners living there anymore. It's all like waterfront stores and property. I think there is even some casinos there, if I'm not mistaken. So you know where that goes. Here, though, we're talking about government ownership, making sure that under President Trump's executive orders for remineralizing the United States and onshoring mineral production in the United States as a national security issue. Have you talked to any sources there, any homeowners who've gotten calls from the government offering them, or even private offers from third parties, ownership of their land? We'd like to take your land because it's sitting on these massive lithium deposits.
I haven't heard of anybody being offered money specifically with relationship to lithium deposits. But what we did see was FEMA moving the goalposts. The Federal Emergency Management Administration redesigned and goalpost what is considered flood zone. So a lot of people whose land had been there for generations all of a sudden found themselves in flood zones, and getting permits to rebuild was impossible. They were offered, pre-storm pricing. And if they didn't take it, then it was, I'm sorry, too bad, so sad. You're going to get a pittance if you can't rebuild because, you're unable to get permitting. The other thing they did to greatly reduce the efforts of people to rebuild and stay was thousands, I think about 8,000 homeowners had some sort of a small bridge going across a creek, a river, what have you, some sort of body of water. And the requirements to rebuild those drive-ready bridges that could support an emergency vehicle should they need it went from being a cost of maybe 50 or 60,000 to, hundreds of thousands of dollars, something that was completely unaffordable for these people. So there was multiple layers in how they really discouraged people from staying where they were and rebuilding, because again, they want you out, whether it's for lithium or it's just for whatever reason. They really want to push people into the cities. You didn't see that problem in downtown Charlotte or in downtown Asheville, excuse me. You just, that didn't exist. But in the more rural areas, absolutely, they were punished for staying.
And finally, how has the recovery gone?
Well, they finally got Lake Lure opened, and that was an incredible effort. They've gotten highways reconnected, but the amount of refuse and floating debris on top of Lake Lure was incredible. And they, presumably underneath that were bodies that had not been recovered. I have not heard any more information on the bodies that may or may not have been recovered from Lake Lure, but they did finally get that vacation spot reopened. And I'm sure for the people up there, that's a big sigh of relief, because those are mostly second homeowners up there that have beautiful homes that found their property destroyed. And of course, a big piece of their lifestyle was put on hold. So for that, I'm grateful for those folks. But still, you've heard stories about the fact that Chimney Rock and other small towns like that made it very difficult and unappealing to have anybody from the outside come in there. And the devastation that those towns underwent was absolutely catastrophic, absolutely catastrophic. Their landscape is forever changed. This is, in my humble estimation, Clayton, this is a big deal, because our government has been funding investments in reopening Kings Mountain. $90 million they put in there in a while. The Inflation Reduction Act basically created financial incentives, while the Defense Production Act secured the supply. So basically, they turned lithium into the cornerstone of the United States energy, AI, and a national defense strategy. And the DoD and the Defense Production Act, all working hand in hand with billions of dollars invested long before even this storm actually happened. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I highly encourage people to watch your documentary. You can find it. I think is it up for free on Rumble?
It's up for free. It was always for free. I never charge. I just wanted it out there.
It's called Ground Zero, North Carolina. You can find it on Rumble for free and other platforms as well, I'm sure. Ann Vandersteel, great to have you here on the show. Thank you so much, and thanks for the incredible work on this story.
Thank you, Clayton.
Appreciate it.
Outrageous.
Unbelievable. But yeah, convenient. Here we go. For 300 years, we'll be able to sustain ourselves off the lithium that's now found under those very sites and where Hurricane Helene hit. I don't believe in coincidences. All right. Coming up on the show, we're going to talk about why U.S. military bases are potentially being targeted. Why are American military bases on U.S. soil experiencing blackouts, power outages, water being shut off? We just heard this from a U.S. admiral who explained this to CBS News. So this isn't a conspiracy theory. We're going to talk with Colonel Rob Maness about that, who's a combat veteran, has 32 years of experience as an energy expert, as well as in the U.S. Air Force. So we're going to talk about this with him coming up in a moment.
But first, we want to tell you about our friends at Lear Capital. Now, earlier in the show, we talked about making sure that your money is hedged into things that will not lose value. That's something that Mike Adams talked about. Do you have gold and silver? Because those are the investments that have held up the best since 2020, when our money has been perverted from the pandemic and constant war economy. You know this. You follow Redacted. So have you done something about it? Because major banks they're predicting that gold could climb over $6,000 an ounce, where they're also predicting that silver could be over $300 an ounce. So the news is finally catching up to what we've been saying for years, that the value of the dollar is under assault, and that's why the demand for gold and silver continues to explode. But who you trust matters just as much as what you're going to buy. We trust Lear Capital. That's where we buy our metals. They're an education-first company. They prioritize customer experience over a quick sale. And because of that, they have thousands of satisfied customers with over $3 billion in transactions. And they offer a 24-hour risk-free guarantee. Sorry, can you continue to tell them about Lear?
You need some water?
Yeah, I just swallowed wrong.
You didn't swallow gold, I hope.
I did.
No. So absolutely. What I love about them is that for 24 hours, like if you make a purchase, you want to buy gold sent to your home, store it in your gun safe, and you're like, maybe I don't want to do that. I want to invest in US dollars. Like, I had second thoughts. I love U.S. dollars rather than actual gold. Great. Give them a call, and after 24 hours, no big deal. Or, before 24 hours, no risk at all. They'll be able to take care of you very, very simply. But this is an American company. Just get on the phone with them. Go to learredacted.com is the website to go to check it out. You can get a free gold and precious metals IRA kit sent right to you. You can also call them 1-800-613-3557 for your free guide. And right now, you can get up to $20,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase. How you feeling?
Better. Yeah. So
Anything else you want to say?
Do go to learredacted.com. And I also want to tell you that if you want to just call them and ask questions, they will have a full-on conversation with you like they are your best friends. They are your friends. Call them at 800-613-3557.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You okay?
I'm all right.
All verklempt. All right. Get in your questions about this, because this is something very weird. And we've been reporting here on the show different odd occurrences at military bases, and it hasn't gotten a lot of attention. The mainstream media has been ignoring this story, oddly. But now the mainstream media is paying attention to it. Why are American military bases on U.S. soil? These aren't ones, in Bahrain. No, on U.S. soil like Michigan, Hawaii, experiencing blackouts, power outages, water sources being turned off. If that sounds like a conspiracy theory, it's not. In fact, Admiral Kevin Lundy explained to CBS News exactly what's happening. Take a listen.
Station Channel Islands, California, had the power cut off. A station in Michigan, Port Huron, had services cut off. Our air station in Barbers Point, Hawaii, had natural gas service cut off. We were able to restore all of it, but we're seeing the number increase, and I expect that number is going to continue to go up.
These are Coast Guard stations that are standing by to respond to search and rescue missions, and the lights are shutting off.
That's exactly right. These are stations where our crews are standing by to respond at a moment's notice to any mariner in distress or any threat to the nation. And they launch 24/7, 365, and suddenly the lights go out or they don't have water.
Admiral, I think a lot of Americans would be pissed to hear this is happening.
Furious. That's exactly right.
And we just learned just now, USS Higgins has completely lost power after a major fire just took it out in the Indo-Pacific region. That just coming into us here just a few minutes ago. There is the gentleman on your screen that we wanted to talk to. That's Colonel Rob Maness, who has 32 years of combat experience and, of course, is an energy expert who served in the U.S. Air Force. Colonel, great to see you. The last time we were on, we were talking about how fragile America's grid is, totally unrelated to like these U.S. military bases. But first, just your like high-level thoughts about what the Admiral has been talking about.
Well, couple of interesting issues here. I had a very similar experience in the winter of 2011. I was the commander of Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, and Texas was supplying natural gas to the state of New Mexico, and because of the cold temperatures, they had difficulty maintaining the pressure. So the natural gas to the sixth largest Air Force base in the world, the largest nuclear mission that the United States has, had its natural gas cut off in the middle of the night without telling the commander. So these types of things can and do happen. The unique thing about the Coast Guard, though, Clayton, is they're not in the Department of War, what used to be the Department of Defense. They're in the Department of Homeland Security, having been moved there from the Department of Transportation in post 9/11 when DHS was stood up. So seeing all of their installations in some interesting states, when you look at the partisan bent of those states, is very, very weird to me, because they should have had agreements in the case of a lack of funding with those local utilities, especially to be able to keep the lights on for their housing and for their critical missions. But obviously that's not the case. And it's troubling. And you know what? It's really sad, because these men and women are on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, prepared to save anybody. They're not just a uniquely military mission, as you know. They're out there picking people off of capsized sailboats in the middle of the ocean, saving their lives after they've been floating in a raft for a week or 40 days and those kinds of things, and do it in all kinds of weather. It's just unacceptable that they can't be funded. I think it's one of the reasons why my congressman, Mike Ezell, tried to get a department secretary political appointee created to take care of the Coast Guard so they'd have a little bit more political pull. But unfortunately, there were a lot of bureaucrats that were opposed to that.
I mean, you would think, given the conversation we're having right now about whether or not we need a White House ballroom because of national security, I always was under the assumption that there are people who are running contingency scenarios in case something like this happens. Was that a false assumption? Doesn't that job exist?
That job does exist, but as I mentioned, the Coast Guard, even though it's really a military service, is not in the Department of War, and you didn't see these types of things happening with Department of War military installations during the last shutdown when their budget was at risk. So I think we on the Department of War side came about to find some solutions to address this issue, while the Department of Homeland Security has not. You know, quite frankly, I think the Coast Guard should be moved under the Department of War as a separate department with a secretary so that it has the political staff